Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for spending a little time with me. I encourage you to provide feedback and converse on these thoughts wherever you find this fine programming. Today's topic continues with another deep dive into one of the best process improvement tools out there. First, we did the tool of process mapping, which was very well received, and today is the failure mode and effects analysis, or FMEA, not the disaster agency, that is FEMA. FMEA, or FMEA, finds the risks and prevents the disasters. I had two alternative titles for this podcast. One of them was FMEA, A Hero's Journey, meant not only as a reference to The Hobbit, but to illustrate to you that doing an FMEA or FMEA will feel like it will take 3 of Peter Jackson's 3-hour movies to complete. The other title was FMEA, a colonoscopy for your process, because it's something no one wants to do, but you really need to. And boy, howdy, when you do it, you sure get to see everything. And it very well may save your life. My goal here is not to replicate the information that you can easily get from any Six Sigma book. My goal is hopefully to provide some tips and tricks from an actual practitioner that you won't find in those sources, from someone who has done this before. I plan to point out the pitfalls that you might encounter and help you avoid them, as well as some advice to ensure this effort is maximally successful. My intention for this episode is to, 1, talk about what the FMEA does for you, 2, walk through the FMEA components, 3, do a hands-on example, and 4, talk about how to fully utilize this tool, this analysis in your improvement project. This is being released as an audio podcast as well as a YouTube video. I'll do my best to paint a picture of what I'm doing hands-on for the audio listeners, but know that you can also watch the video to see what I'm doing by visiting the Dutch Cedar Consulting YouTube channel. So what is the FMEA and what does it do for us? An FMEA or FMEA is a great tool for finding and prioritizing the risk in your business process. You think about that. For a given process that delivers some output to a customer, where can things go wrong? Defective products, late products, dangerous products, delays, missed handoffs, incorrect transactions, wasted materials, unsafe procedures, and terrible experiences. These are scary things that get all the attention, but with this tool, we can add in quantification so that we can put our fears in perspective. How often does the product become defective? What is the impact of a defective product? How detectable is the defect? Fretting about a risk and its effect is not enough. We need to understand how much of a threat this really is, and we also need to be able to prioritize our very limited process improvement resources to work on the right things. For you Six Sigma nerds who know what DMAIC is, the FMEA is done in the analyze phase of the project, which is the phase that comes after measure, as in measure the problem, and before improve, as in improve the process. As a refresher, DMAIC is the acronym that represents the 5 phases of a continuous improvement project: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So why is this important? Because it's important to know about where you are in the project process when we sit down to do this labor-intensive work. We've defined our problem, we've measured it, we've collected information, we've mapped our process, and now we're ready to analyze the information we have to then arrive at some improvement decisions. That's where we are at. What's great about the FMEA is that after you've completed it and after you've identified how things can go wrong and what impact that risk could have, and hence prioritized your risks from high to low, now you have a construct with which to make improvements and measure the effects of your improvement project. That's really so important. In our business, it's so important to be able to measure our efforts, and it's pretty common to be dropped off in an area that is a hot mess, which usually means nothing is currently measured, or worse yet, the wrong things are being measured. If nothing else, we can bring our own measurements with the FMEA and then drive improvement projects and demonstrate those improvements with our own measures. If you've ever tried to implement new measurement systems in a process, you get this challenge. The last thing about an FMEA or FMEA I want to reiterate is that it is a big lift. It is a good amount of work, but it is worth it if done correctly, and your stakeholders will agree in the end. Trust me. Keep listening to this podcast so you know how to get this done with the least amount of pain possible while maximizing the benefit. First, the inputs. What do you need to do in FMEA? First, you need buy-in. You need to convince a project sponsor and process owner to be willing and able to invest the time and energy into doing what is a lengthy, exhausting, and frustrating process. You'll also need to include the right stakeholders and subject matter experts. Ideally, this is not done with one person in the room, but rather several. And you'll see why when we get to the method. If you have risk, compliance, or safety professionals in your organization who support the process in question, you'll want to invite them as well. Ideally, the team will need to stay together and for a few lengthy sessions that go 90 to no longer than 120 minutes in length. The time required is determined primarily by how many process steps you're looking at and at what level of detail those steps are. It's also important to note that we want the same group that starts the analysis to finish the analysis. This team will be collectively scoring items, and we want them to be as consistent as possible. For example, if a hard grader can't attend session 2, then the quantified risk effects will be likely lower in that session than in session 1, and we will have less confidence in our analysis. I suggest breaking the work up into sessions no longer than 2 hours in length, just because people have their day jobs, and any more of this than 2 hours is exhausting. If the situation warrants, you could keep working until complete. This has the advantage of keeping the team together and keeping the momentum going. The disadvantage is that fatigue is likely to produce a poorer product as the session goes on. People will just want to leave the room and will agree with the consensus just to speed things up. Second input, you need a detailed process map. This is a process map that exists one level above the procedures level or the how level of the process. Certainly the how is important, and your subject matter experts will need to be able to bring that knowledge into the room, but the process map shouldn't be at that level. A big part of the technique with this tool is to get it done in a timely manner so we can get to the analysis, but without the paralysis of biting off too much, going into too much detail and losing momentum. Your subject matter experts can always bring procedure level information as source material for the discussions. You'll also need to be able to share the FMEA spreadsheet as you go. Everyone will be working on filling that document out together. Preferably everyone is in the room and you have a large monitor in the room and you can use it to display the spreadsheet for all to see. Finally, you'll need a good workspace and an initial 2-hour block of time to get started. Set expectations that depending on how things go, you'll need to schedule more time. Unless your process is 10 steps or less, you'll probably need it. Some snacks might be nice too, and a FMEA template already completed and ready to go, of course. Make sure you're ready to go. You've filled out the template, you've checked the room, the audio visuals, so you don't waste anybody's time. To recap, to do a FMEA, we need buy-in from the business. That means a real business need, as well as agreement to take on this hero's journey together for likely multiple sessions. The right participants who will commit to participate until completion, a mapped business process, a good place to work with an initial 2-hour block of time scheduled, snacks, and a prepared FMEA template from you, the facilitator. Method. Let's first go through the FMEA format and then we'll add in our business process. Let's pull up the FMEA template and go through the columns. So I've got the failure mode and effects analysis pulled up on the screen. We can see the first column here is process step. You will add your process step here row by row. I've got some examples in there already. Each row is a process step. Be sure to number these on the map and bring that number from the map here. Second column is potential failure mode. This is what can go wrong. It's important to note here that we have a one-to-many relationship between the process step and failure mode. In other words, in our table here, we will likely have a number of rows underneath the process step to show each of the modes, each of the failure modes. After this point in the tool, from this column onward to the right, we will now start analyzing and quantifying. So column 3 is the potential effects of failure. So now that a failure mode has occurred, what bad things happen? There can also be a one-to-many relationship between the failure mode and the failure effect. When something goes bad, it can create a number of effects that are each worth analyzing. The next column here is severity. What is the likely impact of this failure? Does this failure mode go unnoticed by the customer, or does it cause bodily harm? This is a score that will be decided on collectively by the team. Next column here is potential causes / mechanisms of failure. Here you list what could have caused the failure mode. There could be a one-to-many relationship between the mode and the causes, meaning we may choose to create more than one row for more than one cause. Note that these are referred to as potential causes, reminding us that for higher priority risks, we will need to validate the causes later. The next column is occurrence. How often does this failure mode occur? Several times a day or once every 100 years? This again is a score that will be decided upon by the team. The next column is current process controls. What do we have in place today to inspect, prevent, or detect the failure mode? Note, this is not where you put your future actions. That comes later. This is what we do or don't do today, not what we want to do or what we hope to do or what we even could do. We need the truth of what's happening or not happening right now. The next column is detection. This is a numerical score of how well this failure mode is detected or prevented. Is the failure mode obvious and the defect is kept from the customer, or are the defects completely undetectable? Again, this is a numerical score. And then this column right here, the RPN, or risk priority number. This is why we use a spreadsheet, because this is a calculation of the product of severity, occurrence, and detection values. To me, this is the most important column. We've turned qualitative information into something that is quantified. The rest of the table is used once the FMEA is completed and we have identified our highest priority risks. Once we have those, then for the failure modes of particular interest, we will fill in recommended actions to mitigate the risk, the owner of the mitigation actions, a list of what actions were taken, the date the actions were taken, and then we're going to do a revised severity score, revised occurrence score, revised detection score, detectability score, and then finally we're going to have a new RPN calculated. So from this sheet, you can easily identify the most concerning failure modes in the process and quantify the improvements the team has taken in terms of reducing those impacts. To prepare for your session, all you need to do is to add to the first column the process steps from the detailed process map. Process map steps should be numbered, and those numbers will carry over into this document. You may want to add a column if you're using a longer notation, but it's a good idea to number these, especially if there are identical process steps, because we are going to sort all these risks and all these effects by RPN, and they will be immediately out of process order. For example, if you have notified customer in your process multiple times, you want to be clear on which one of those process activities you're focusing on for remediation. Also, expect the first few process steps to take a long time to drive out in the FMEA session as the team finds its footing. Not only will the team be learning a new tool, but they will be developing their own workflow and normalizing their scaling decisions. This is okay and natural. Let the team work through this. Sometimes to go fast, you need to go slow. You just focus on facilitating, coaching, and encouraging the team. All right, so let's begin walking through the FMEA. And what I've done here is I've created a fun little example process that we will use in our example. So we're producing lattes, and we have a swim lane here with 2 roles. We have the cashier and the barista. So we have about 9 process steps. The process starts with the step 1, where the cashier receives an order and a payment. Then the cashier will send the order to the barista. The barista receives the order, and the barista will grind coffee beans. And then in parallel, I'm assuming this is in parallel, I don't know, I'm not a barista, but I'm assuming they can steam milk and extract espresso in 2 different process steps at the same time, maybe not. So we've got steamed milk, we've got a espresso shot that's been extracted, and then in step 7, they combine the espresso and the milk. Step 8, they're going to add the lid, and then they're going to deliver it to the counter. So I'm envisioning kind of a Starbucks type thing here. So the lid, and it goes to the counter, and then it goes under the counter, and then the cashier will deliver the coffee. So okay, maybe not like Starbucks, but so anyway, so step 9, the coffee's been delivered by the cashier, and that is the end of the process. So we've taken the order, we took the payment up front, and then the coffee gets delivered at the end. So I've moved those steps over to the FMEA document. So let's pull that up. So now, again, you'll recognize your 9 steps. So we would come into the session. We've got the 9 steps identified. The process map presumably has been kind of approved and blessed and all that by all the subject matter experts. There's no debate over what the process map is. And now I'm going to be Mr. Facilitator and say, okay, with when we receive the order and the payment, what can go wrong? What could happen here? So maybe we talk to the folks and the experts, and they're like, you know what? Sometimes we don't capture that payment. So maybe there's a failure in the payment. They scan the card. It isn't, something isn't processed, isn't run through, the card's declined, that kind of thing. Or I guess you can have another thing where maybe they took cash, but they did not properly enter the cash or whatever. So what's the effect of the payment not being captured? Well, there's a, revenue loss. So we lost some money here. Any other effects from this failure? I think there's probably a few. So what we do here is, like I said, there can be a one-to-many relationship between the failure mode and the effects. So we're going to insert a row here. And now you could either, I kind of like I think you have to bring these down. Because once you sort all this, I want to be able to sort all this. And then you get some formatting issues here, but we'll probably have to deal with that later. So, all right. So what's the other effect that we might have? Well, if we're talking cash, right, we're going to have some sort of like mismatch when we do the drawer, the cash drawer inventory. Probably inventory and drawer count, cash count. So that's going to be uncomfortable. Any other effects? Let's think about, when we facilitate these sessions, don't forget about the customer. What's the effect on the customer? So there may be an issue where there's a customer dispute, perhaps. So if the payment's not captured, I don't know if that could happen. So again, this is what we kind of would hash out. I think could be a longer reconciliation. That could be an effect of the failure mode, but I don't think that's a separate thing. So I don't know if we need to go any further with this one. So again, we can kind of hash this out with our team. So maybe we'll stop there with the effects of payment not captured. So we can go in 2 different directions. We can kind of keep driving those out and keep talking about those examples, or maybe want to keep going and do a couple more failure modes. I think we're going to do another failure mode here. So, all right. So what could go wrong when we're receiving order and a payment? Okay, the payment didn't get captured. What's the obvious one? Again, thinking about customers, well, the wrong order was taken. You ordered a latte and I thought you said, I don't know, I don't know, you confuse latte with something else. Maybe I just thought you wanted like just a regular Americano or something like that. So what's the effect of that? Well, the customer gets the wrong drink. Maybe a good example here would be the customer ordered a decaf. Maybe the customer ordered something that did not have cow's milk in it, and instead they got cow's milk. So we'll get to that, to the effects. Hold on, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So the wrong order was taken. Customer gets the wrong drink. You're going to have to remake the drink. So that's money, that's cost, that's delay. So I think that's pretty good for now. So let's kind of hold up there. I would want to make sure we drive out any other failure modes. I think just kind of for the for this as example, we're going to keep moving. But other failure modes could be the change. The wrong change was given. Maybe the wrong price was entered in, so we took payment but we overcharged the customer. Some of the, maybe, and it kind of probably includes in wrong order, but you could have had some order modifiers that were wrong. Again, what kind of syrup, what kind of milk, what kind of size. So we'll probably include that with wrong order. You could have did a duplicate order. And also another thing could have happened is that maybe the customer wasn't acknowledged or treated well or recognized. So, kind of that customer service with a smile. So failure mode might be that the customer was treated poorly. I think maybe we'll include that one. I like that one. I think that's going to be a good one when we get to detectability. And what's the effect of a customer being customer doesn't return? Let's do something else, and let's say customer gives a poor review online. So not only does the customer not return, but now the customer is on TikTok or YouTube Shorts saying how lousy place this coffee place is. So yeah, not good. All right, so let's take a look at severity. So again, this is where and I think this is where I want to kind of stop and talk about scaling. So now that we're at severity, let's talk a bit about scoring our risks. A few principles to keep in mind. First, it matters less what kind of scale you use, and it matters greatly that you apply it consistently from start to finish in terms of scale and judgments. So with respect to scaling, some people use a 1 to 10 scale, and that gives you a fine-grained analysis approach. Some people use a 1 to 5 scale, which is naturally more coarse-grained. So you can see in my example, I have my spreadsheet set up for 1 to 5. Some people use a 1-3-9 scale, which is handy when you want the bad things to really pop numerically. The thinking behind the 1-3-9 method is that you don't want bigger risks to be seen as only like a few digits off compared to a smaller risk, so it's not that big. To me, having your risks pop is one consideration. But I think a bigger consideration is that you don't want to spend a lot of time in sessions having argumentative participants haggling over whether a risk is a 4 or a 4 or a 5 or a 4.5, when it's very likely it won't matter because the other two numbers might be very low, and so your RPN is going to be low anyway. For the haggling reason, the 1 to 10 scale for me is really not my favorite. Again, is it an 8? Is it a 7? Is it a 9? And because I know you're thinking about it, I also firmly reject the idea of collecting everyone's scores and then averaging them somehow. Forcing the team to arrive at a single score requires the team to come to a consensus, which forces everyone to listen to each other. These conversations are very important because it means information sharing and making stakeholders aware of how these processes work and how risks are controlled or not controlled. So back to scaling options. I like the simplicity of a 139 scale. I've used this on FMEAs in the past, and I think it's worthy of consideration. With that scale, you can truck quicker through the scoring portion of the work. If you think about it, for a given risk, you know if it's a high, medium, or low pretty easily. Tiebreakers are easier. Do you have a contentious or argumentative group? If you're working on a FMEA with, say, a group of lawyers, you might prefer 139 just so you can keep making progress. In the end, with a 139 scale, you can only have 7 possible RPNs. So you take a look here, so if you do the math on RPN of 139, these are the only 7 RPN values you can have. So 139, 27, 81, 243, and 729. So with this question of what scale to use, you'll have to feel out the situation and make your best judgment. Also, the other important point here is once you start scoring things, you don't want to make a lot of changes to your participants, especially if it's a small group to start with. If you have a small group of people, there will be a lot of participant variation that can't be helped. So maybe the 139 scale will be the best choice in that situation. For now, we'll split the difference and we'll use the 1 to 5 scale, which, if you're curious, it will give you 30 different products. So here are 30 different numbers going from 1 to 125. So you can see here, even here, you're getting some more fine-grainedness to it, but on the higher ends, once you get to the higher numbers, the RPNs really start to kind of pop. All right, so we're going to keep going here. So let's talk about severity. So again, we talk about, okay, this revenue loss, how severe is that? It's 1 coffee. I don't know, it's not a huge sum of money, but you are losing money here. Like money's going out the door. So that might be a 4. Potential causes or mechanisms of failure. Maybe the system failed. Something wrong with the system. How often does the system fail? So now we're going to get down to brass tacks. Well, we're using some antiquated system, or maybe we're using like the first gen of the chip readers, and the chip readers don't work very well. And so maybe the occurrence is kind of high. All right. Well, we'll continue going through this. So now, what's the detection? What's prevention? What's inspection? Well, we do have a crummy system, but the system actually does kind of prevent the register from functioning, because it's an integrated system. Even though the payment capture is not happening, it's pretty obvious. So the work the order can't. So maybe the credit card order can't proceed. So that gives us a very detectable situation, right? So the person at the cashier can't go any further with the order because the system has failed. So is that a high detection or a low detection? Let's talk about a little bit about detection. A common mistake is to forget that bad is always towards the highest number. It's natural to think that a high severity is a 5, right? Something very severe, it's a 5. And if it's a high occurrence, it's a 5. But is high detection a 5? No, it's not. No, it's a 1. So 1 is good, 5 is bad, right? So low detection or no detection would be a 5. If this proceeded through and the cashier didn't know any better, this would be probably a 5. But it's a 1. So the ability to detect failures is a good thing. So just watch out when you're going through this that high numbers are bad, but a high number for severity is like very severe. A high number for occurrence occurs all the time. A high number for detection means it's not detected. Maybe let's go back to this one. Detection is a 1. We might think about, part of process control is prevention. So I don't know. I don't know if we want to do a little higher number, because it is unfortunate that we weren't able to prevent that error. So maybe we'll give that a 2. So, you can see here we've got our nice little, got a little formula here that automatically multiplies 4 times 4 times 2. So we have an RPN at 32. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, so payment not captured. There was a mismatch between the inventory and the drawer count. Severity, again, that's kind of like a revenue loss situation again. I guess we can just say, we're going to say 4 for that right now. The cause or the mechanism of failure. This is where I'm not even sure what the, if there was a mismatch, so now here's the thing, right? So if there's a mismatch, it's the failure mode is the payment's not captured. So we may want to get to a theft situation. Maybe the cashier's taking some money home. That would not fall under the failure mode of payment not captured. We would need probably another failure mode under here. So we could add a row here to capture something to that effect to capture that, but it doesn't strictly fit in here, but we don't want to lose that idea. So if there's a mismatch, what's the cause of the mismatch? Again, maybe we can say there was a miscount, but again, we can't say miscount because the payment wasn't captured. So I think we might be back to system failed. So now, if there's a system fail, so here's an example where if we've got the same cause, then we really should be giving it the same occurrence. And if your team kind of wants to stop and kind of haggle about this, we can go back and change that to a 3 or 4, but you want to be consistent. Is there any process controls? Maybe we're right back to that same thing where, you could have a system failure, but we wouldn't have been able to proceed with this situation. So maybe we do kind of fall back on the fact that we think our system is going to prevent. All right, so now I got to do some copy and pasting. There we go. All right, so let's keep moving. We'll do one more. Let's do wrong order was taken. So the cashier types in the wrong thing, gets puts down an Americano instead of a latte. The customer gets the wrong drink. How severe is that? The customer got the wrong drink. That probably is the most severe. So let's give that a 5. The mechanism, order misentered. We would call that kind of fat fingered. I don't want to put that term in there. We'll say fat finger. This, how often does that occur? Maybe not too often. Maybe our folks are pretty good. Again, this is where our subject matter experts say, actually we're pretty good on that. So we get it right pretty good. So process controls. What could detect this or prevent, or what inspection could catch this? What do we have in this system that prevents the misentering of the order? Our subject matter experts are like, we don't really have anything. The barista's not going to know. They're going to make whatever's on the ticket. The customer's not going to know. There's no information that tells the customer. Maybe there's something on the screen. Do we have anything? So again, to talk to our subject matter expert, is there anything on the order screen that tells the customer, what their order was? It's a first generation. No, there's nothing. There's really nothing to prevent. So that means our detection is bad. Certainly we're thinking right now, we could probably figure out something that we could do to fix that, right? So we might want to start jumping into solutioning. We're going to keep going, right? We're going to keep moving through this first. Plenty of time to solution later. All right, so back to the failure mode, wrong order was taken. Okay, so the other effect, right? We're going to have to remake the drink. the severity of this, probably not. It's inconvenient to the customer. We've already kind of covered off on the customer's effect, so now we're kind of, so this is a good example where it's like, okay, I said there was a revenue loss up here. Is it the same as that? No, probably not, because we're going to remake it at cost. So maybe it's a 3. It does slow our process down, our operations down. So maybe it's a little less severe than the loss of revenue of not getting giving a coffee for free and not getting that money. We're remaking it. This probably goes back to, again, what's the cause of the failure? Probably the same. We'll go ahead and say that. Again, if there was some other thing we wanted to put in there, we could. And then process controls. No, nothing that comes to mind, guys. So now you can see that we have the same failure mode, 2 different effects with the same causes, same process controls, but one of them is higher than the other. So this one touches the customer. It's our highest RPN so far. So good. All right. I'm gonna make sure I get these formulas all copied. All right. 2 more. So customers treated poorly. All right. So our cashier is not pleasant, not friendly. Customer doesn't return. Wow, that seems pretty severe. Is it as bad as a 5, the customer getting the wrong drink? Maybe that's too high. I don't know. But it seems to me that businesses that operate on repeat customers and loyalty, that it's one thing to lose money on 1 cup of coffee, but if we're going to lose the money on a cup of coffee every week for the next 5 years, that's tremendous. That's really huge. So what's the cause of this failure? Poor training. How often do we have incidents of baristas not being trained very well? Again, judgment call. Maybe we're pretty good at it. What's the process? How do you detect a situation where customers get treated poorly? Do we have a manager on the floor? Yeah, we do. Okay. Kind of manager on the floor. So we have that. So that now, is the manager always paying attention? Maybe it's not great. So maybe we'll give it a 4. All right. Finally, okay, customers treated poorly. Customer gives a bad review online. This is where, like, oh, can I go higher than 5? Because that is going to happen. Plus that. All right, let's put that to 5. Again, we could probably just copy and paste. All right, it's all the same, right? So there's a case where we've got 1 failure mode, but it's giving us 80 points on our RPN. So it's kind of an interesting little thing, right? Where this one failure mode's giving us also 80 points. So if we can solve this problem, we're solving for these 2 RPNs. It's very interesting. Okay, so I went ahead and filled in a failure mode for each of the process steps. Some of the process steps have more than 1 failure effect, and really not complete. Just wanted to get enough rows on here to make this next step kind of fun. So we're going to sort by RPN. So I select, and my table's weird because I have some merge stuff. So I'm going to select just up to that first row. Go to custom sort, pick column I, largest to smallest, hit OK. And now I've sorted by RPN. So of course you immediately see that all the process steps are now jumbled up. Got some weirdness going on there. So it looks like process step 8 and 9 pop to the top. So let's take a look at those. So we've got 3 RPNs of 100, followed by 2 RPNs of 60, 50, and it goes 32. My little diagram this is arbitrary. You don't have to pay attention to that, the coloring, but it helps kind of sort the high risk from the low. I have one down here that's a grand total of 3. So we have our low things. So again, you wouldn't want to spend any time on this because it's so low. But what popped to the top? Okay, so we have some burns, and we have really related to putting the lid on. So again, we could cross 2 process steps where we're dealing with lids on coffee. The lid's not applied. The occurrence is pretty high. Detection is non-detectable. Maybe for whatever reason. Severity is 5. So those 5 times 4 times 5 is 100. So yeah, those pop to the top. So immediately in terms of looking at improvement efforts, I'm drawing a circle around those. So, and again, we would do this later on in the improve phase, but you kind of take this away, and then okay, now we're coming back. Okay, what are the things that we can do to mitigate this situation where the lid, and fortunately, these top 3 are all the same, so we can probably just handle that. So what is recommended action to mitigate the risk, and then what are the target resolution dates? So you could put the date in here. Another thing too is like this, you would take this information, put it here, you're probably putting it in a countermeasures document like an A3 or something like that. So I don't know, I'm not crazy about having the information live in 2 places. I would be okay if you kind of put like C some other document, but at least initially, and for this group, we want to go ahead and fill it out, right? So what kinds of things can we do to make sure we're putting the lids on properly? Maybe we need better lids. Maybe we think that the lids aren't that good. Some lids are better than others. So maybe better lid sourcing is going to be one of our possible improvements. And let's see if I can get this to work. And then what else can we do? Better training. So, and then maybe another thing would be supervised by the manager. I don't know. These are just ideas, right? Oh, didn't like that. Sorry, I'm gonna do this. There we go. Who's responsible? So somebody's gonna take the lead on driving these out. I could see. This is where again this is becoming a project tracker. So if this is more than one person owning it, you got to kind of cram all this information. Maybe Maggie's going to take the lead. Can't put hyphen in there. I'm going to do that. Actions taken, new lid company, training program implemented. Okay, we completed all that. Maybe we did that on the 3rd. So now we've got new lids. We've got our training implemented. We know training is pretty weak when we talk controls, right? It's not great. But the lids is interesting, right? So now let's rescore. So did the severity get any different? No, I don't think the severity, we're ever going to be changing the severity. So the severity is the severity. So we shouldn't be messing with that. But the occurrence, hopefully we're bringing that down. So the lid's not applied properly. Well, the lids are great. They're easy. They're not cheap. Maybe it dropped it to a 2. And then in terms of detection, well, yeah, we got a manager keeping an eye out. Are they really watching every lid go on every cup? Probably not. Maybe we bring it to a 4. So maybe we got some improvement. But the lids, right? The lid's a better control because I can't circumvent it. It's not like we have a bunch of the old lids sitting around. We know the lid is better. They're going to slap that lid on. So that's a good mitigation of this risk. Telling our training people better, telling our managers to keep an eye out are weaker mitigations. And our scoring, we can have the discussion with multiple experts and come on now, and hash it out and have a real conversation. And okay, maybe we come to realization, okay, but the lids changed the game, and now we went from an RPN of 100 to 40. So that's huge. And we would take all this information, really copy and paste it for these other, because since we're solving for this this issue of the lid popping off, that applies to all these. So we can copy and paste. So with better lids, we've brought 3 risks of 100 down to 40. So when I talk about being able to quantify our improvements, that's it right there. So let's talk about our result. We've examined each process step and elicited from the experts not only what can go wrong in the process, but why and to what effect. And we've quantified each of those impacts. Then once we completed this work, we carefully sorted our FMEA so that the top risks pop to the top. If we are following a traditional Six Sigma DMAIC methodology, we would most likely be in the analyze phase. We would stop at this point and include the FMEA in our analyze tollgate deck with some commentary on what we found. Questions I would ask in a tollgate, if I'm a reviewer of a tollgate, I'd say, well, what risks turned out to be smaller than you expected? What risks turned out to be bigger than expected? Generally, did anything surprise you? And hopefully, I think if this is done properly, I think there should be some surprises. So I would dig a little bit if I'm not hearing anything surprising, that the team should be surprised, I think. Another question would be, is there anything here that we need to deal with immediately? In our example, we found that we have a significant injury risk because it turns out the lids on our coffee cups are no good. So maybe we got to deal with that immediately before we even get to improve. Maybe that's a just do it project, like go after that right now. And then so to that point, right, which high RPN effects will be addressed in this project versus other projects? So again, that example, maybe we need to take that away. That's a significant risk that is not even part of our project, but it's got to be dealt with. So that's going to get carved off into a new project. So, and of course, assuming that the project sponsor decides to progress this project into the improve phase, then we would pick this FMEA back up and consider improvements to reduce or eliminate risks or defects. This naturally is going to depend on the type of project that we're working on. We need to keep our project charter in mind as well as our problem statement and what metrics we are seeking to improve here before undertaking risk reduction work. Which risk items on this list are going to move us to achieving our project goals? Not all of them likely are. So in addition to considering high RPNs, we also have to consider what line items support our project goals. For example, if our project originated because the coffee company had been sued for allergy injuries due to incorrect ingredients being used, we would likely focus on just those failure effects and ignore all the others. The purpose of the FMEA in that case was to determine at what point could allergens be incorrectly added to our products. Similarly, we could be solving safety issues because baristas are experiencing reportable burn injuries at a higher rate than normal. For that project, we would largely ignore the issues with customer satisfaction and revenue and focus on the safety issues, unless, of course, that's customer safety, which now becomes definitely in scope. Note that even if you are given a narrow band like this in your project, if there has not been a FMEA done before, I would try to do it even though it means examining risks outside of your scope, because you can clearly see this completed analysis can spur any number of worthwhile projects. And we don't want to do a FMEA that is only partially done, meaning we only focused on allergens or safety. We don't want the business picking this FMEA up and misreading it as being a comprehensive document, when in fact it was done with a narrow scope. So I'd say this is a good place to wrap up. To summarize, the failure modes and effects analysis is a deep and exhaustive way to identify risks in your process and to prioritize them. The tool is used in a traditional analyze phase of a Lean Six Sigma project and is good for finding how and where things go wrong in the process. By quantifying your failure effects, you can prioritize your improvement efforts. And because you've quantified the current state, you have the opportunity to quantify again after improvements have been made and demonstrate that the project team has made measurable improvement. After all, at some point in any project, you have to deliver value. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to go to YouTube or LinkedIn to be part of the conversation, or send a text using the link in the show notes. Your feedback is critical. I welcome driving constructive conversations so that we can all get better at this thing. As always, onwards and upwards. Thank you.